If you or someone you know is struggling with alcoholism or addiction, do not hesitate to reach out for help. You can find numerous free resources on our website, thebeginagainpodcast.com, and there are tons of resources and support networks available online, in person, or just a phone call away. You don't have to face this challenge alone. Welcome to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes. On the Begin Again podcast, we delve into the inspiring journeys of individuals who have overcome alcoholism and addiction and emerged as true trailblazers in entrepreneurship, business, sports, and beyond. Through authentic, uplifting, and profound conversations with our guests, we aim to shatter the stigma surrounding addiction and demonstrate that recovery can be a catalyst for remarkable success, strength, and resilience. We firmly believe that by listening to these accounts, you will be empowered to unlock your own potential, instigate positive change in your life, and contribute to the creation of a better world. So, get ready to be inspired and embark on your own personal journey of growth with the Begin Again podcast. Do not hesitate to reach out for help.
Man, I need help. I need to see you today. And he's like, 12 o'clock, which means he gave me his lunch, right? I make my way there. I'm holding it together. I have felt what I felt before. I just felt like the weight of the universe was on me, crushing me. I sit down in front of him. He's like, okay, man, what's going on? And then that's when I let loose and had the nervous breakdown. And then he asked me one question. He's like, all right, have you had any deep suicide thoughts? And I said, yes. And that's all it took, man. That's it. One of two options. He's like, we get you a bed at a facility, or I call the police. And I'm like, man, that's extreme. He's like, he's a nice guy, and I love him to death. But the point he was trying to make is you ain't leaving. And if you try to leave and you try to run off, I got to call the police on you because you've admitted suicidal thoughts and tendencies. So, of course, I was like, dude, take me away. Like, I want to hide. Anything I can do, put in place. I was all in. He's like, all right.
I reached out to God in a real and miraculous way, and I said, God, please help me. I can't stop drinking. I haven't had any drugs or alcohol since I said that prayer, since I said that message to God. I said, God, please help me. I can't stop drinking or doing drugs. I did not know that was the day I was going to get sober. When I woke up, I had no idea. Nobody emailed me. Nobody texted me. Nobody warned me. It just showed up in my life in a real and miraculous way. Stumbled down to a payphone in an Italian restaurant. And so I got on that phone. I looked up Alcoholics Anonymous. It said San Diego, Alcoholics Anonymous, central office. Called him. Guy answers the phone. He goes, Alcoholics Anonymous, San Diego. How can I help you? I said, my name is Michael. I'm an alcoholic. I've been drinking every day for 8 years and doing drugs. I can't stop. I used to be an Alcoholics Anonymous a long time ago. I got 2.5 years clean, but I've been relapsed for 8 years. And I don't know what to do. I think I need to come back to AA. So there was about a 15-second silence on the other end. Nothing, no response, no sounds, nothing. Just a pregnant 15-second pause from the guy on the other end of it. And eventually he said, welcome home. Welcome home, Mike.
I get help in spades. And God, my higher power, the God of my understanding, speaks through other people. And that's the primary way I hear my higher power today, is through other people. But I have to be willing to listen, and I have to be willing to ask for help. And really, the Way Out podcast, and I think the Begin Again podcast, is really rooted in this idea that sharing our stories is the lifeblood of the recovery community.
I'm like, I have all this and I have nothing. I'm a loser. You know what I'm saying? Enough is enough. I could not stop on my own. I walked away from my own business. It's $1 billion a year business. I just one day I'm gone. See you. Well, what about all the accounts? You keep them. Just walked away. And I went into the doors of rehab, which I said I would never do because rehab is for losers. You know what I mean? Oh, look at me. Why would I go into rehab? But I did. And I told myself that I wasn't going to tell anybody who I was. Not that it's a big deal, but, where I live, what money, or, who cares? Right. I was just a regular dude that felt less than zero. Probably like most people who walk into rehab, it's not like on my bucket list of things, fun things to do, trust me. But I couldn't quit on my own. I admire people who can, and a lot of people do. But for me, I was so chemically dependent on, you're talking about a handle of vodka a day and mounds of cocaine. Like I think I finished a key in 6 months, which they tell me is pretty fast. I mean, I don't know, who cares? You know, at the time. But you know, if I would stop any one of those pollutants for even an hour, I would get violent shakes and I would feel ill. But at the same time, you know, I would drink not to feel those shakes, but in drinking, you know, I would vomit. And you'd think like I'd lay off, but I'd wait till I finished vomiting and then I'd have another sip just to balance. I'm gone. I'm just like afraid, like if I stop cold turkey, I'm going to get a heart attack or something. And
when the fog started to go away from me being in this daze of the drugs, of heroin and everything like that, and I started to finally come back to myself. It took about 2-3 weeks for me to be like, oh man, I'm here and I'm dealing with lawyers, I'm dealing with all these court cases and everything like that. That's when I just started to turn everything around. I started to really just turn to God. I'm like, God, just give me the answers. Like, I promise if you help me get out of here, I will help others change their life. I will do whatever I can to never come back here and to do right and to follow your path is to be the creator and to walk in your light. And that was the one guiding thing.
Basically agoraphobic. I had a hard time being around other human beings without being drunk or on an anti-anxiety pill or something like that. When I finally admitted that I really needed help and that I was ready to surrender completely, it was terrifying, you know, because that was my only coping skill. But thankfully, I had the support of some people that pointed me in the right direction.
And I finally had to just face the fact that, like, hey, I need some help here. And I don't really have many other options at this point, you know. And luckily for me, my buddy Seth, you know, we've known each other since 5th grade, I think. And he had quit drinking about 2 years before I did. And so I always had that in the back of my mind, like, damn, if Seth, and he was a different drinker than me, and he's been on the podcast a bunch of times too. And shared his story and stuff. He was in the Coast Guard and he dealt in 9/11. He was in Staten Island when that happened. And so he was helping to, you know, pull victims out. And so he had a lot of stuff that he had to deal with. And so alcohol was his best friend through all that, just being a coastie and like that's what they did. And so I knew how he drank. You know, I knew what he went through. And I remember telling myself, man, if Seth can do this, I can do this too.
And he had just gotten out of the Army. He did 7 years in the Army. So he had the time to help me get sober. The very next day, I gave him all of the Xanax that I had, and we began a slow taper. And it took me about 2 years to fully get off of Xanax with him and my parents' help. After those 2 years, at the very end of my Xanax taper, I found out I was pregnant. Also within those 2 years, Justin and I fell in love. So I guess I should say that first before the pregnant part. But we fell in love and I had gotten pregnant. And I was in recovery. And, you know, I was just so grateful that my life had turned around and I wasn't living in chaos constantly.
You know, after my 27th mugshot, I finally said the most honest thing that I've ever said, you know, that we get, you know, tons of messages and people reaching out, you know, to the Rock. And it's usually loved ones and family members, you know, hey, can you help my son? Can you help my daughter? Can you help my husband, wife, all that stuff. And we have an automatic response. And because we've had to set boundaries up in place, you know, we direct them to the website and there's resources on the website, you know, where they can get help. But if it's someone that I know that's a close friend and, you know, they want me to talk to, you know, their loved one, my response is that, you know, he can call me, you know. If it is a lady that's going to reach out to call me, I have a boundary in place a disclaimer that I say, I'll talk to you, but you're going to be on speakerphone with another woman in the room. Do you have a problem with that? So they don't. And, the direction I go there is to try to get them, connected with another woman, that's in recovery that can help her. But when I do talk to these men and these ladies, I ask a simple question and I tell them there's a right answer. And that answer is, why I ask them this question: why do you drink and why do you do drugs? And they always come, back and explaining. It's my husband, my wife. I go, wrong answer. My job, wrong answer. I was abused. I have trauma, wrong answer. And all these things, these questions I'm asking, and they eventually get frustrated, and it's good when they start getting frustrated because they go, M2, I don't know. I said, that's the right answer. And that's what happened to me that I recognized is that I finally said, I don't know why I drink. I don't know why I do drugs. I don't know why I'm doing this. And I'm willing to do anything it takes to get clean and sober. And I didn't care how long the judge was going to put me in prison. I just didn't care anymore because for so long I was trying to get clean and sober my way.
How could something that loves me so much is put me through so much pain? At that point in my life, I had no faith in a higher power, in a God, whatever you may call it. I had no faith in something else out there because to me, if something created me and loved me so much, why was I suffering so bad? And I'm driving through the reservoir and I get to this tree that in 1996, 2 years after I graduated, my best friend lost control of his vehicle, hit the tree, and unfortunately lost his life at the age of 18. And I get up to the tree, and his parents have put this beautiful vase on the tree, and they have a picture of him that is nailed into the tree. And I get up to it and get out of my truck, and I go up to the tree. I'm crying. I'm like, Bill, I need help. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I survived. If there is anything else out there besides me, please send me a sign. Please let me know that I'm not alone, that everything is going to be okay. And I get back in my truck and I go to leave the reservoir. As I'm driving out of the reservoir, for some reason, I pull over on the left-hand side of the road facing oncoming traffic. And I pull over and I'm wiping the tears. I'm blowing my nose. And I sit there for about 10 minutes. I'm crying. And this car pulls up. And since I'm on the wrong side of the road, now we're windshield to windshield. And I watch this gentleman get out of his vehicle. He opens the back door. He grabs his dog. He's about to walk across the street to where the water is and go take his dog for a walk. And I'm looking at this man. I'm like, man, he looks familiar. Man, I know him from somewhere. So I get out of my truck. And all of a sudden it dawns on me. It was my best friend who passed away in 1996. It was his father. This date is March 16th, 2017, 21 years later. I haven't seen this man since the day of my friend's funeral. And I get out and I say, Mr. Bill, is that you? And he looks over at me and he says, Timmy, is that you? I said, yes. He goes, what's wrong? And I fall to the curb and I'm crying. I'm like, I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. I tried to commit suicide. I lived. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know my purpose. And he walks over to me and he puts his hand on my shoulder. And he says, Timmy, I'm not supposed to be here this morning. My bags are packed in my car. I was supposed to leave at 6 a.m. and head down to Myrtle Beach for a family reunion trip. My wife came to me in a dream last night and told me to hold off and come to this park at 10 a.m. this morning and walk the dog. I believe I was sent here to see you. And I looked up at him and I said, Mr. Bill, I just stopped at Billy's tree and asked him for a sign that we weren't alone, that there was something else out there. And he looks at me and said, everything's going to be okay, Timmy. They're watching out over us. We're being protected. And I get in my truck. And as I'm driving out of the park, I have about 10 minutes to where I feel as if everything is going to be all right. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be protected.
Or honestly, when I look at it, every single rehab I went to with reservations. That rehab this was the first time that I was just like done. I knew I needed to go to rehab. I know I needed to go get my bipolar back under control. And so there was a mall that was near the field. And I know that there's always like cops at the mall. So I'm like, I'm going to go down to the mall. I'm going to find a cop and I'm just going to wave around my beer can and drink in front of and just act like a fool. Right. And get their attention. And so that's literally what I did, is like, I just went and I saw a cop car sitting there and I'm all just waving my beer cans and stuff like that. And they got out of the car like angry. And I was just basically like, I'm like, I need to get to a mental hospital right now. Like, I'm off my meds. I'm out of my mind. I need help. I need help.
If you want to be open about it, get ready. And I'm not talking about the people that might slam you or have something negative to say, especially if it's on social media and they know you in your using days. It's the people that reach out and ask for help. You better be ready to, pardon my language, fucking help them right away when they ask for help. That 100%. I think is the responsibility of it, that people need to understand when they make that decision for themselves. If you're going to be out there and you're giving out the help, then you better give the help when it's asked. And
that is where it all changed for me. So do you want help? And I said, yeah, I'm dying. This is after 7 attempts of suicide, and on 2 occasions it worked. I was pronounced dead and they brought me back to life, them pigs. I hated them people for that, but that's where it started, right there.
Amazing. You hated the people for bringing you back to life. Is that what you just said?
Yes, I hated them because I didn't want to live, man.
Yeah.
I didn't want to live. I couldn't live without alcohol, and surely I couldn't function with it. So now I know the neuroscience behind that, which is amazing. But at the time, I didn't know why I couldn't stop drinking. I really couldn't. So when I had my hands and knees crying, I wasn't in the streets before the guy came along. I wasn't crying because I lost my wife, or my kids, or my houses, or my license to practice, or my mum and dad. I was crying for the first time in my life. I realized I couldn't stop drinking.
Responsible for this abuse was me, the one staring back at myself from the mirror. And I'll never forget that moment, the moment where I thought all hope was lost, the moment I stood looking at myself, deciding whether or not I was going to live or I was going to die. And I came so close to taking my life that day, September 12th, 2004. 3 days later, here I am sitting on a metal bed with scratchy white sheets in a psychiatric facility, waiting for a bed to open at the rehab next door. I'm petrified. I'm alone. I'm empty. I don't know much, but what I do know is my name is Karen. I'm an alcoholic, addict, anorexic, bulimic. I'm lost. I'm alone, and I need help. Please don't erase me. I need you to see me so that I can see myself.
Inventory of my life, and that's a big part of my program, is daily inventory. We do our well better hows. What did I do well today? What could I do better? How am I going to do it? And just being conscious of that daily, daily, not weekly, not monthly, fucking hourly, daily reflection. Am I doing okay? Yeah, I'm doing good. Am I doing okay? No. Okay, I need to stop and I need to call some people that help me.
Yeah, here I am carrying this around for months, years, decades, like this deep-seated resentment for what? Like, it's not affecting anybody but me, and some of that, like you said too, like some of that stuff was really hard to let go of. Yes. And I needed the help of other people to get me to the point of saying, like, you got to let this go, and I was able to do that over time. I was able to do that. And there were some, this one I want to hold on to for a little while. It's like, okay, when you're ready, how free do you want to be?
Right.
How free do you want to be?
Exactly.
Because if you start feeling good as you're making these amends, as you're owning your shit in that situation, granted, some situations in my life, I didn't know anything. Right. And it was, I don't want to say a valid reason to feel the way that I did, but the things that happened, yeah, I was, it affected me emotionally.
Yeah.
So then I needed to start getting to a lot of heavy prayers. And then I really started crying for help. Like, I told God, put somebody in my life that can help me, because I want to mess some people up and I can't hold my anger. I want to blow up and start cussing. I want to do some damage. And I reached out to some counselors, some Christian psychologists that came to visit me, and they started doing some inner healing prayers with me. And they started working on my childhood events, traumas, uprooted childhood issues. They started going deep, dealing with the inner child stuff. We started doing a lot of different prayers, a lot of different stuff. And I started feeling the difference within me. I started feeling the inner peace, the inner healing that was happening through this whole process. Well, they would come once in a while, but then I would have to work on myself too. They sent me books, materials to study. I got connected with other ministries. I was hungry, but I was also desperate. I wanted this healing.
Yeah.
I wanted this healing because I didn't want to, in there, I wasn't going to use drugs. Everybody else in there would use drugs, self-medicate with alcohol or heroin, whatever they had in there, they'll use it. Oxycontin, you name it, they had it, they'll find it and they'll use it. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do any type of dope. I wanted to just heal naturally, well, supernaturally with prayer and God's help.
Right.
Soberlifeschool.com.
Mhm.
And if somebody, I just changed it. It flows a lot better now, but you can get like your free guide if you're just like at the beginning. But I do offer private one-on-one coaching, and all, there's like, it's been 3 phases, right? And so there's like setting the foundation where we talk about, how to establish a self-care routine, because all of this. So in my mind, I've come to understand that we only allow into our lives what we believe we deserve on a subconscious level. And so I'm all about addressing root cause. And so we kind of set the stage, the foundation for the first few meetings. And then we do a hypnosis session. It's like a guided meditation.
Yeah.
And, all hypnosis is really self-hypnosis. And I'm just like facilitating a guide. It's not like stage hypnosis where you see people acting like chickens. It's not, or doing weird stuff. It's not that. But it's just a way to relax your mind so that we can reach these subconscious ideas, beliefs. It's really a belief system, right? And so we're reframing like that experience that you had, when your friend was like, "Oh, think about how the other guy felt." Well, that's that's a reframing experience where you kind of go back in time and you think, what else was going on? Well, there was somebody else there and they had their own feelings. And they were like, we were talking about an inventory. It's like they were that was a response to your initial action, right? There's a cause and effect. So the cause was, you scared. And so it's like, what, but it's done in a very loving and compassionate way. But so that's sort of the process of going back and trying to find out where these triggers were installed and reframing it so that we don't respond from that way. And then ongoing parts work, a lot of this stuff takes a little bit of time to heal. But I just feel like the combination of hypnosis and IFS type work really addresses root cause. Because even in long-term sobriety, you'll hear in the rooms people talking about whack-a-mole, which refers to, oh, I've been working on this one character defect and it seems to settle and then it pops up somewhere else. And so I always think what that is a sign of unresolved trauma. It's unresolved trauma. And so I hear it kind of breaks my heart, but I'll be in a meeting and I hear people talking about that. And I'm like, that's unresolved trauma. People who can't get sober, who relapse a lot, that's unresolved trauma. And we need to be a little more open to suggesting and inviting people to seek professional help. But that's where all my stuff is at Sober Life School.
I was in my bedroom and I had a gun in one hand and I had my life in the other hand. And it was this voice, call it God, call it whatever you want, that just said to me, if you don't make a choice right now to get sober, you are going to die. And it was just as clear as day. And finally, after all these years, the first time I ever did it, I asked for help. And then I went to treatment after that, because I always thought that asking for help was a weakness. I had bad experiences when I asked for help and told the truth in the past. And I didn't realize it at the time that actually asking for help was a very healing moment for me. And it was actually the most courageous thing you can do, is to ask for help.
Sure.
And thankfully, I had somebody in my life at that time. He was an angel. He actually took the steps to help me. So helped me find a treatment center, and I went to treatment.
She walked into my room with a look of fear on her eyes. She looked terrified and just asked, Daddy, what's wrong? Are you okay?
Oh boy.
And it was just that moment
Yeah.
that I just said, what? You can't do this, man.
Yeah.
You can't do this. I was okay doing it to myself.
Yep.
And I can't believe I say this, but it's like I was okay doing it to Natasha, my wife.
Mm.
But all of a sudden I was like, I cannot do this to them.
Yeah.
So I walked down the hall, and this is where we had gotten to. My wife was staying in the guest room at that point because she couldn't stand the sight or the smell of me. At night, she couldn't sleep in the same room because it just reeked of booze.
Sure.
So I walked down the hallway and I said, I can't figure this thing out. I need help. And that was it. That's all she needed to hear.
0 to 120 in 9 months.
9
So
months.
during that 9 months, I tried to quit a few times. I didn't have the mentality. It was like I went to rehab and they put me on drugs where I was in my room one day and I'm like, oh, my wife's here. And she brought my dog Blaze. I could hear my wife talking to someone at the counter and I hear my dog barking. I'm like, wow, they even let dogs in here. This is cool. So I'm sitting in my room and I get up and I go down the hallway. I'm like, hey, where's my wife and my dog? She goes, excuse me? I go, I heard my wife and my dog. Where are they at? She's like, yeah, I'm sorry, sir. Your wife's not here and your dog's not ever going to come here. I'm like, no, I swear to God, I heard them. I go back to the room. He goes, man, this is your first time here, right? And I said, he goes, they give you stuff where you hallucinate and you hear things.
Oh.
And I'm like, are you serious? So whatever they put you on in rehab, it'll get you through the withdrawals, but sure, God darn, don't want to get hooked on that either.
Yeah.
So I went through rehab. I was probably there for, I don't know, I probably checked out early, 2 weeks, 10 days. And on the way home, I stopped at a party store. I mean, it was like, I just didn't have it up here. And they always say that you have to hit 100% rock bottom for that switch to go off, for like to be on your knees crying and asking God for help. And I actually wrote a short ebook telling my story and some of my philosophies behind exercise and creating new habits. And I mentioned that too. If you think that, the scary thing is on social media, I see people advertising programs for sobriety, and they're actually saying, well, we're going to teach you how to just have 2 or 3 drinks a night. This guy's never been where I've been. There's no way anybody's ever going to be able to program me to be able to have 2 or 3 drinks.
There's no such thing. Okay. Let's just be clear. Listen.
It's progressively got worse. And I started to experience severe withdrawal, of shaking, of almost hallucinating. And I was so nervous to stop because alcohol is one of the only drugs that you can die coming off of. And so I Googled cardiac arrest on my parents' bedroom, my childhood bedroom floor, because my husband had set a boundary. If you drink here, you have to leave. And my parents didn't even know what to do with me. They were like, she's went to Hazelden. She went to this. She's supposed to be cured and she's not.
Right.
What's going on? What do we do? Like she's, and so they kept tabs on me, which made me want to drink even more.
Right.
And so and I felt my hands going numb and I just said, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to have a heart attack. I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. I was extremely malnourished. And I had been going with my dad to his office because they had to keep tabs on me. And I would try to sneak mouthwash. And I remember my last day, April 23rd, and I would try to sneak to the Target downtown and get mouthwash. And I'd started throwing up in the garbage can and I blacked out.
Oh.
The next time I woke up is in the hospital and my mom was by my side and I started crying and I just said, help me. And that's all I said. And I couldn't stay there because detox beds were full. And so I went to this other detox and I blew a 0.34, which scared me, but to the extent that I had been doing that for the past 2 years, drinking to that extent, if not more. Like how many other times did I cheat death? How many other times did I push it and get away with it? All of these times. And it was in detox and I had court the next day. I had lost my job in February of that year because of not showing up and not performing. I had started to lose all of these things as this girl who raised from a great family. I got great grades. I achieved, I won awards, I won all this, to physically being homeless, no job, no money. And I had to push it to that extent for me to finally wake up. I had to lose things, and I hope people don't have to by hearing other people's stories. But for me, I'm very tenacious. And I had to push this to the fear of losing my life, that I gave up and I surrendered. And I said, it's like I had an out of body experience. And I looked at myself on the detox bed and I'm like, what the hell am I doing?
Yes.
And I just said, I'm so effing done.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
I had so many things to clean up. I had no money. My husband wasn't talking to me. My parents weren't really talking to me. I couldn't go home. I had to call homeless shelters from there. But I said, you know what? As long as I don't drink, I can't make this any worse. What if I just did the next right thing?
So the first time I detoxed, I had no resources. I went in there saying I had 10 months clean, or 10 months as an addict. This time, and this is the benefit of going in and out of treatment and in and out of facilities and in and out of jail, I was keenly super aware that I was a drug addict. It was
Right.
really bad, and it looked like I wasn't going to be able to stop, and I desperately needed help, right? And I already knew my sponsor. Fortunately, she had already been my sponsor. You know, she'd been working with me over the years, and I was dating this guy in drug court, right, that I had met through a meeting. And so he said, watch Game of Thrones, which I'd never heard of. So I was like, my friend had a fire going and I'm like chain smoking cigarettes, and he bought me shoes. One of the days he came back with like some Skechers, and he was like, hey, I brought you some shoes. And I was like, oh, you didn't need to do that. You're already like bringing me back to life. And he was like, well, no, but I did, because you only have one shoe. And I was like, no, I don't. And he was like, Ginny, and I picked you up with one shoe on. And I said, get the fuck out. No. And he was like, you had one shoe. That's why I bought these. And I ran to the little like guest room where I was staying.
Yeah.
And not only was it one shoe, it was a boot. It was a wedge boot, zip up knee high boot. So I had walked from the doghouse to the Burger King with one high heel on
Oh my gosh.
in public on a Sunday morning in front of God and everybody at 10 in the morning with one shoe with no recollection. So anyways, he buys me shoes. So I stayed there for 2 weeks, just like watching Game of Thrones, whatever. And then while I was there, the guy that said you could get clean,
Yeah.
he lived in a sober living and he was trying to get me in.
Right.
And the guy that owned the sober living did not want to let me live there because he kicked me out twice before for selling heroin on the property to
yeah.
other people. And so he was like, I'm not letting her back. She's a nightmare.
Right.
And you know, Brooke begged for me to come back, and looking back, I think he must have paid a deposit or something, because suddenly Steve relented and said, you can come here. You got to test clean the moment I see you. With his girlfriend, Shatima did the testing and they knew all my tricks. And he was like, and Shatima's going to be in there when she's testing you. So no funny shit. Okay.
You know, like all your accomplishments and your awesome unstoppable wrestling belt and all that stuff, right? It doesn't pale in comparison to a relationship you have with your son, your family. And you get in sobriety.
It didn't occur to me actually until just now when you said it, that a parent always doesn't want their kid to get into drugs and alcohol and stuff. But the idea of my kid self-destructing because of how hard his home life is, because of my addiction, that just didn't occur to me until now, because he's going to be an adult in less than 2 years, and setting him on that path, if I had not chosen that I needed help when I did, that's a sobering thought, is the idea that his home life would drive him to self-destruct with drugs and alcohol. And there's plenty of places to get it around here. And the Pacific Northwest is just as bad as anywhere with drugs and people self-destructing.
You made that decision, Kenny, and so your son's not growing up in that environment. And I couldn't think of a more beautiful and more important thing to be grateful for.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love that you said that the steps, because I think it's important for people to hear that the steps are what began your journey of changing your life.
Yeah, it truly was. There is absolutely no way that I would be where I'm at today, here sitting with you talking about being almost 5 years sober, without the steps. I stopped counting after 13 rehabs, numerous psych wards, sober living homes and everything. I went to therapists, psychiatrists, and all these things. Took anti-anxiety medications, antidepressants. None of that stuff worked. And none of that helped me with stopping the drugs and alcohol. The only thing that worked was the 12 steps. And I was so resistant to working these steps. I didn't want to have anything to do with taking action. I didn't want to have to do anything that wasn't like an immediate, I can't think of the word.
Like a fix, like a,
Yeah, an immediate fix.
yeah. Immediate
If I
fix, it'll
can't,
feel better. And
yeah, if I can't see, the thing is with drugs and alcohols, you shoot up, you feel it immediately. You take a pill, you feel it immediately. You take a shot, you feel it within a couple of seconds. So I was there, there's the word, immediate gratification.
yeah.
If I didn't have that, I didn't want to do anything else other than that. I was told that it was going to take time. It was going to take patience. It was going to take courage and resilience and perseverance to do these steps. And then I was going to have to change every single thing about myself. And that was scary. But the thing is that I learned is it says we were told in the program 1 day at a time. My sponsor told me that for the first time. I said, Roland, I said, 1 day at a time. I said, a day, 24 hours feels like an eternity to me.
yeah.
And he goes, well, what about an hour? And I said, that's too much. He said, what about a minute? I said, no, what about a second at a time? He goes, we can start with that.
Yep.
And so that's what I started with, because the thing is that at the very beginning of sobriety, if I am looking at the big picture, if I'm looking at the entirety of my life, that's going to get really overwhelming really quickly.
Yes.
But I focus on this moment right now and start to be able to identify when my mind starts to be going into the past and when it starts to go into the future. And when that occurs, I can bring myself right into this moment by using tools that I was giving in this program that will keep me at peace. And then if I start experiencing worry or fear, I know where I'm at, either in the future or the past. Or if I'm depressed, I know I'm in the future or the past. One of those things is you're not in this moment. Stay here, right now.
So here I am trying to negotiate with the consigliere that's where my addiction took me. So what happened was I crawled back into the rooms of AA. I put my hand up. I said the 3 words that no addict wants to say, which are the very 3 words that'll save your life. I need help. How does this shit work? I get a call from the sponsorship coordinator that night. He says, I have good news and bad news. The good news is I found you a sponsor. The bad news is he's not going to take any of your shit. And we all know you're full of shit. And Jimmy the Rock was my first sponsor. Couldn't have been a different person than me. He was an iron worker, blue collar, right? And he walked me through the first 164 pages of the big book, and he saved my life, or showed me how to save my life. And then he got me into step work. He got me into service. He used to always say, service keeps you sober. It says in the big book, nothing ensures immunity from drinking more than intensive work with another alcoholic, right? And so I started chairing detoxes, going to prisons, and with my then grant sponsor, going to Rikers Island and speaking at prison. And I was on fire with the program, and that saved my life.
It was confusing, and I didn't know what to do. And he was in his own denial, which makes sense now in hindsight, obviously with the value of where I sit now. So his denial, the lying, which all makes sense, and just a lot of confusing behavior, and just the decline in the situation, the decline in our relationship, the decline in my own well-being, my mental well-being, my physical well-being, psychological well-being, and it just kept getting worse. And the help that I would have wanted at that time, once I realized it was a problem, which actually took a few years, and then once I realized it was a problem for me, which took a few more years, there was no help for me. And I just didn't know what to do. And I had started behaving in weird and wild ways myself. And obviously we can talk about those things on the other side there that we might find ourselves doing. And I'm sure you've seen it as well. But I needed help too. Once that became obvious to me, I needed help. And there wasn't really help for me. It either wasn't accessible in terms of I had 2 small children, or it didn't feel kind, it didn't feel right, or it was just not helpful. So it was hard. And so what I then did I became less and less enchanted with my corporate life. And I thought, this is just not okay. And I went and sourced as much information as I could, as much training as I could. And I continue to do that. But I thought, this is what I want to do. And there are millions and millions of people around the world who are trying to navigate this behind closed doors like I did. And they need help. They need help. So that's where I got to. And that's how I'm here.
Podcast is the hope that to hear these stories will inspire and help one person today.
Hearing stories that they help them and make them feel better, knowing they're not alone, but also it might encourage them or inspire them to speak out for themselves and seek for help with their family, because a lot of people feel shameful about their problem too. They don't want to, either they're in complete denial or they get it, but they don't want to show their hand.
In sobriety, that asking for help is one of the most courageous, strongest things that a person can do.
Right.
It's like this epiphany that all these things that I thought are the way to live life, it dawned on me in sobriety that I had it pretty much all wrong, and I need to totally restart, recalibrate. I've had similar epiphanies, like, what, all the shit I did to myself and all this shit that happened to me. I'm even at the point where I don't even want to say happened to me. It's just the shit I did, the shit I did to myself, right? I'm flipping it on its head. I'm going to help one other person with it, hopefully every day, with my story or with my experience, right? With what we're doing today. But you're the one, and it was recently, a couple of weeks ago, right? You're like, best people I've ever met in my whole life are in recovery, and I said to Jason, and I'm certainly repeating myself, I think I say it almost every episode, or anyone who ever asked me about the podcast, what this wasn't when I had this like bright idea. I didn't know what podcast was really. I mean, this bright idea is, hey man, I didn't know there was anyone else. I'm like, it's gonna be a great idea. It's gonna be just me. I didn't know there was a whole lot of other ones, but I get on my knees. I said this earlier, and I say my prayers, and now my prayers are valid. Let me help one person today, right?
But do not hesitate to reach out for help. Thank you for tuning in to another powerful episode of the Begin Again podcast. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. We hope that today's conversation has ignited a spark within you, affirming that recovery is not only attainable, but can also be a wellspring of strength and resilience. Our ultimate goal is to make a difference in someone's life every single day. By sharing these stories of redemption, we strive to empower you and inspire you to unlock your fullest potential, facilitate positive transformations, and contribute to creating a better future for yourself, for your loved ones, and the world at large. If you know someone who could benefit from listening to our show, please share it with them. And if you resonate with our mission and feel compelled to do so, we would greatly appreciate your support through a 5-star review, following us on Instagram, and subscribing to our YouTube channel, The Begin Again Podcast. The more positive reviews we receive and the wider our message spreads, the greater our collective ability to help others realize that change is possible in their own lives. Thank you once again for being a part of our community. May you be blessed on your own journey of personal growth and transformation.